Are we there yet? Oh my gosh, every parent's worst nightmare question. What do you do when you're in between, in the meantime? That's what we're going to talk about today. I'm Jacob Sheriff. This is my podcast. As usual, I'm here with Josh Needham, Tyler McKinney. We're talking about here as we're closing up, coming towards the end of season 1, talking about a important topic that is easy to overlook, and that is, what do you do in the meantime? How do you make it from here to there when you're in between?
Yeah.
How do we do it?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm sure we're going to have some great responses to it. But before we get to that, I am going to read a positive, encouraging review from Rala. They say, "Great listen!" with exclamation points. This podcast is super. I'm a professional reader, and I can't read this.
They don't say that. They don't say that.
Maybe I'll pass
Josh
it on.
Oh, gosh. Okay. This podcast is super well-rounded for Christ followers, leaders, friends, spouses, and parents. I really appreciate the authenticity and vulnerability to share previous and current experiences, as well as learnings from these. I enjoy the book recommendations and takeaways. Dude,
Well done.
12-year-old me would have been so nervous. Your turn to read. Like, oh, no.
Public reading. Oh, no. Well, thank you, Rala, for that review.
Yes,
and if
thank
you would be so kind as to leave us a review, let us know what you think. We really enjoy producing these, but it's also very encouraging to see that people are actually listening and responding.
It's great to hear feedback. Feedback always helps us refine, improve.
Yep.
So leave a review. We appreciate it.
And real quick, before we get into the topic, I do want to remind everyone that this is the second to last episode of this season. Next episode, we're going to be doing a question and response episode. So we need you to send in your questions. We need you to look back on the last episodes of this first season. What stuck out to you? What things have been helpful? You have questions, anything that we weren't clear on, send us those. We'll post the links to that in the video. I'm going to give you some post-production work, Tyler.
Yeah.
There'll be something that pops up somewhere, and a link in the description as well on where you can send those questions. So we really appreciate that.
Perfect.
Really helps us make sure we're addressing things that people care about. So if there's something that you really care about that you want to hear a take on or maybe a response on, because that's why we call it Q and R, because a Q&A makes you think that we have an answer. I don't always have an answer, but I almost always have a response. So we'll ask the question. We'll see how we can address it.
Very good.
So in between, how much of our lives are spent between one thing and another thing, or always sort of looking to whatever that next thing is, whether it's a change in season or a change in life circumstance or a new business or a new endeavor that we're looking at. So much of our life is spent between here and now. How do we do that well? And what learning can we share from our experiences?
Yeah, most of our life is in between. We don't have tons of their experiences. We always are asking, are we there yet? And we get annoyed at our children for that because they're very impatient. And then if we just took the time to reflect on ourselves, we realize that's all of us. We're all children who are impatient, and we want what we want right now. And that's deeply formed in us in a consumer culture that all of us have either totally grown up in or spent our entire adult life in. You would have to be in your 70s or 80s to really remember a culture and an economy that wasn't consumer based. So all of us have lived in a consumer economy where everybody's competing to give you what you want when you want it at a decent and discounted price. And so we are formed most of our life of getting what we want when we want it. And you don't have a capacity to develop patience when you live in that. And God is perfectly content to allow us to not get even what he promised when we think we should get it. And so most of our life is spent in between. It is important that we relate properly to that season if whenever we do arrive there, wherever the there is, to experience that properly and not just turn that into a new in between.
Yeah. So let's maybe get a little more tangible with this, maybe with some life examples or something. So we're talking between, here and there in very abstract terms. There you insert your meaning for whatever there is. But share maybe a season from your life, and I'm going to ask you first, Tyler, because you haven't said much this episode just yet. When was a season? And you're kind of in a season, though at the time of this recording, you'll be further along in the in the season.
We will be almost done.
You'll be almost done. But share about your learnings from a season of waiting and being in between now and then.
Yeah. I think you have a lot of obvious ones, so I'll pick at least one, maybe two of those. But I think a good one that most people can relate to would be within relationship. So you've got your dating, and then you're in between before your engagement. And then your engagement is just an in-between before your marriage. And then your marriage is before you have a kid. And then you're like, so it's this kind of thing. I think right now, currently, like you said, when this goes live, we will be like 2 or 3 weeks away from having a baby. So we have been in an in-between of for a while, 9 months. But I think that's one of the most perfect analogies is like something's being birthed, something's growing, there's growing anticipation as well as a growing human. There's growing anticipation as our family as we prepare and we're ready. And we may get to that point where we're 7-8 months pregnant and we're like,
when's this going to happen?
Yeah, like we're ready. We're ready. Now we're just kind of in the waiting, just ready. And so what do you do with that time? Do you waste it? Do you, what is there left to do? And so I think that's a lot of what we're covering today. So I'm not going to spoil.
Yeah.
That's my secret way of saying I don't have the answer.
I'm not going to spoil by giving you an answer I don't have.
Jacob said earlier, I almost don't ever have an answer. I don't remember exactly.
I don't always have an answer.
Don't always.
But I almost always.
Okay, my version of that is I almost never have an answer. I might give you a response. Anyhow, but yeah, I think we're kind of in that right now. We're feeling that out right now. And so when you were talking about that earlier today, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm living in this right now.
Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating. And we are not the most exercised at patience culturally. And even those who follow Jesus, who should have more exercise and self-control, patience, those are all fruits of the Spirit. We are not immersed in a culture that is conducive for that development. And so I think when dealing with an in-between, and everybody should be able to relate to that because there's something everybody's going through that you can see out there, a new job, a career. I think of when you're in high school or like when you're in elementary, all those older upperclassmen that are in junior high, you want to be there.
Oh, yeah.
And then junior high, you're like, oh, well, there's those high schoolers. And then you're a freshman and you're like, oh, I'm a loser. I can't wait till I'm an upperclassman. And then sophomore is a oxymoron. That is an in-between. It's it means like idiot. I mean, soft wisdom, moron, more. So like you're a wise idiot.
You need more. You need more wisdom.
That's awesome.
And then you're like, oh man, those upperclassmen, junior and senior, like, oh, I can't wait to get out of school. And then you get in college and you're like, oh, I hate college. I can't wait to get out of college and get a good job, a real job. You get a job and it's not enough pay, so I can't wait till I get that pay. I own a house. Oh, I can't wait till I own a house. You own a house and then you're like, oh man, I hate these bills and can't wait till I make more money. Or, oh man, I'm single and I can't wait till I'm married. And you get married and you're like, oh, we can't wait till we have a kid. You have a kid and you're like, what the heck was I thinking?
And you look back at those high schoolers and you're like, those guys are idiots. Why did I ever want to be there?
So it's like that's though like the life that is conditioned for us, that in culture, like that's the life we're being conditioned for, is to always think my happiness, my joy, my fulfillment, my purpose, my meaning is always at a new there.
Right.
And then as soon as we get there, it doesn't take long before we realize there's another there. And that the first thing is to recognize that we're believing a lie if we think we can't experience joy, meaning, purpose, fulfillment in the in-between. The in-between is not our final destination, but to think that getting to a destination is the meaning, is the purpose, is the fulfillment, is joy, then we're sadly mistaken, and we're not learning to value the season we're in, that God is perfectly content to allow us to be in.
There's I think another analogy, or maybe it's just like a micro version of this, like how much of our time, day-to-day life, is spent on the way to someplace. Whether it's I get up and now I'm on the way to the shower, and then I'm on the way to I'm on the way to the car, then I'm in the car.
It's more like I'm on the way to the coffee pond.
Yeah,
the
that's
coffee
more
shop, and then I'm on the way to work.
And how little time we can, if we're not careful, or how little time we actually spend being aware when we're on the way, like being present to that moment. It's almost, even in a day-to-day way, we're conditioned to have an event and then get from that event to this event, to this next thing, to this next thing. And it's in those in-between moments, oftentimes that I've found, at least, when I am aware and when I am paying attention, that I can hear God. I can take those moments to listen and to pray and to be aware and to spend time with Jesus, in the car on the way to where I'm going. And I think we don't value that a lot. We're very quick to fill those on the way times with whatever distraction we may be consuming at the moment, whether it's a video or who knows, maybe you're listening to this podcast on the way somewhere.
Yeah.
And well, good for you. That's a good step in the right direction. Anyway, a little self-promotion there, but
we'll say thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
But if we say something that you need to pause and contemplate before the Lord, we give you permission.
Yes. But that's a micro version. And then when you scale that up to, okay, that week went by and I went from here to there, what actually happened in between? It's, if we're not paying attention, that in between time just gets lost.
Yeah.
And we're not stewarding it well.
It's shocking to see how much of Jesus's ministry was on the way. Very little of Jesus's ministry happened when he arrived at the original place he intended to be at. Most ministry is happening on the way to something. He's being interrupted, and that always struck me as odd. Not odd, I guess I should say I could not relate to that, because when I'm on the way to something, I'm going to get there, and I'm not going to let anything stop me. And sadly, my personality is wired to be more driven by task than by people. And so it's easy for me to ignore people on the way to a task or to do something. And I think if you just think of like the father of our faith, Abraham, he did not have a lot of great moments. And the distance between the promise made of Genesis 12 and the promise fulfilled, where he actually has Isaac, the promised child, is 25 years.
Wow.
And why? What could have changed that? I don't know. We don't really know. But the only time in that time period between the promise made and the promise fulfilled that you see Abraham getting it right is in Genesis 15, where it says, and he believed God, and it was accounted to him in the right, or righteousness. And almost immediately after that, he blows it again, and he gets ahead of God and tries to have the child for himself. And then a lot of stuff happens that is probably not the most interesting for this topic, but I think, wow, like how our origin story of faith is a 25-year period between a promise made and a promise fulfilled. And we struggle when the promise isn't fulfilled in like a week. Like we think God's delaying, or that we're in the wrong or that God's not going to be faithful when like there's a week goes by or a month goes by, when we have a promise that we know God makes and yet it's not fulfilled. And I would say the most important thing in the meantime, in between, is trust. Like, do I actually trust God? Do I consider him to be faithful? We can theologically say, oh yeah, of course God's faithful. But then we practically believe he's not going to be faithful, that he's not going to be true to his word because it's not happening when I think it should happen, the way I think it should happen. And that only should expose to us our immaturity.
Yeah. Yeah. The amount of time that gets wasted, and I'm just thinking on personal experience, like when I look back at seasons of my life where I felt frustrated, if I'm doing an honest self-examination of where I was spending my time, so much of that frustration didn't necessarily come from or just having to wait and be bored in the meantime. It was that I wasn't paying attention and appreciating what was around me. I wasn't valuing where I was, and I wasn't taking time to reflect and to appreciate the beauty that was right there in front of me. The moments with my kids, the conversations with my wife. I was always in a state of wanting to get to whatever next form of entertainment or distraction I had sort of allowed to become an addiction in my life at that time. And how much time and opportunities wasted. I can now, looking back, I can have regret, and I can look at that and, get myself depressed if I wanted to. I think the learning, though, in reflection, is just a recognition of how that can inform and make me more appreciative of the moments that I experience that delay now. Sometimes the best thing for us is for us to not get what we want at the time that we really feel like we want it. There's so much growth and so much opportunity for us to develop and learn that prepares us for what's next. And we don't know what is next a lot of times. We don't know what that next challenge or that next season is going to be fully. And so if we're so pie in the sky, just like wishful and wistful of like, oh, what could be behind that next thing, that we're not paying attention to the moment and what's there right there in front of us, we'll miss a lot of times what joy can be found in there.
It's interesting and somewhat curious that many great thinkers across many religious much of the religious spectrum, where they locate happiness and what they define happiness to be, and this interestingly is across many religions, including the Christian faith, where happiness is located is in the present moment. That there's not a there for the happiness. It's the present moment. It's, can we be fully present? And in the Christian faith, can we be fully present to God? Can we recognize God's presence? Can we recognize our connection to him in the present moment? But most of us do not live in the present. We live in a hurry to the next. And even when we arrive, that was a major threshold I discovered in myself, is how addicted to hurry I was, to the point where, I sped everywhere. And now I think I've had a few tickets in my life, and that's enough. Like I don't generally make the same mistake twice, but I do try to trick the system. And so I've tried to figure out, like, in what areas, like how much higher of the speed limit can you go before they stop you. And for some spaces and places, it's 10 miles, some it's 5. And so anyway, I just recognized I was always in a hurry. And there was a day that I recognized I was in a hurry and I didn't have to be. And it was like a moment of awareness that recognized I have so internalized hurry that I'm in a hurry and I don't have to be. Because there's times where you have to hurry. But how much I lived for that feeling of rush and hurry and just to get there, and how much of life, which I got 5 kids, and my oldest is 10. And so for 10 years, we've been raising children. and how much of their life I've missed in a hurry to somewhere else. And it was convicting. And then I read something Dallas Willard wrote is in instruction to one of the people he was mentoring, when this person was busy and they were overwhelmed, and they were on the phone in this conversation with Dallas Willard, and Dallas Willard paused and took a long thought, and he said, "You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. Hurry is the great spiritual enemy of our day." And I just recognized how much I wasn't connecting to God because I was waiting to be at some arrival point to connect with God, and not recognizing, yes, we still need those slow moments of patience and time with the Lord, but like on the go is still an appropriate connection point for God. And so I started to, I read a couple books, and then started unhurrying my life and recognized how much I lived for the future and how little I was aware of the present, and how much of life, like my children's life, that I missed not being present, always in a hurry somewhere else, always thinking about the other, the next thing. And it was really discouraging for a season, but I've now about a year and a half been working on the hurry in my life has made me, and even right now I'm in an in-between. It's incredibly frustrating. And we're talking about this like in real time on this one. There's sometimes we can look back on our life and be like, oh, I learned this. Well, I'm having to relearn a lot of stuff. Relearn some things about myself, relearn some things about my wife, where we feel like we know there's a move coming. We know we're going to be moving. And there's so many things on the other side of a move that I can see in the future that are a lot easier, that facilitate where we need to be, what we need to be working on, the rhythms of our life, the things that I can't experience fully here where we're at. And so I just want to be there. And my wiring is very much toward the future. And when I can't live into the future that I see, I just get irritated at the present and just kind of become either down or just kind of mean, because I'm just agitated as to, I can't do this. I can't. And I miss so much of the present. Well, my wife doesn't really like change. I'm a change agent. Like if we're not changing, I feel like I have to change. And so like I love change because it's always a new challenge. And my wife, she's not against change. She's just resistant to it because she lives very much in the present, and wanting to be fully present to the moment and what God's saying now and how we do that. And so that causes tension in our marriage of like, I want to just tell her like, get over it. We need to get going. And she's like, Jacob, you're a jerk. You can't push me. You can't push our family. And so we
see
work
episode 5.
Yeah, go back to episode 5. There's more about our marriage than even we see there. We'll just maybe do that in season 2. But like we're in the middle of that right now, where there's a tension that we work on daily and talk through daily, that like I need to get over my frustration and learn to be present and thankful in this moment. Just because I can't do something that the future holds doesn't mean I can't be present and joyful in this moment and in this present. And what I have learned that I'm having to exercise now is not to force God's hand. We don't force God's hand. I do believe God's leading us to move. Not very far away, so I don't know if that makes, I don't want to scare anybody. We might already be moved by the time this episode drops.
Yeah. That's in between. Talk about in betweens. We're recording this in April, and this is going to post sometime in July.
Yeah.
So
who knows where we'd be? It's part of even like my gift of working in the future and living in the future, and then able to bring the present toward the future, so that the present doesn't become in just this lockstep status quo. But any gift that you have also has a weakness, and my weakness is to get irritated and frustrated at the present. And I become the immature child. Are we there yet? Dear Lord, are we there yet? And last year in 2020, I had to go back through some of that cycle with the Lord and kind of work through and think through patience and what patience is and how patience gets worked. And I would like to say that I learned that a long time ago, and I learned what I needed to learn, and that was it. But I will have to admit that at least 3 to 5 significant times in my life, the Lord's had to circle the wagons with me, go around the mountain of patience again. And just towards the end of 2020, having to get settled again, that like how patient God is and how he is perfectly content to allow us to be exactly where we are, and yet does not force us in any direction, even towards his own will. And having to learn how to settle and trust God in a moment that he's content to allow me to be where I am when I would rather be somewhere else, where I would rather be further along. And I think about that in my immaturities when I had like that moment of self-awareness, like, oh my gosh, why am I struggling with this again? Why have I hit that? Why have I made this mistake again? And yet recognizing God is perfectly content for me to be where I am and work with me right where I am to get me where I need to go, and never force that, never condemn me for where I'm not, never force where I need to be, but work with me right now. And in my connection and relationship with him, he lead me where he wants me to go. And it's really painful.
That's good.
It's not easy, and it comes in seasons and cycles too, right? It's like sometimes you can't even keep up with all the change that's happening, and we hit those seasons, and
i.e. 2020.
Yeah, and it's just you have a new challenge every day, and you're kind of hoping, can we tap the brakes for a second? You know? But one of the things that I think just as a dad has been interesting for me to see is I can tell whenever I'm not in a patient place or in a place of waiting, because I start to see it in my kids, and I start to see them being impatient and them like just needing whatever the next thing is. And we had a recent sort of reminder of that and a recognition of that. I actually wasn't at home when this happened, but Audrey had the girls and she was doing prayer time with them. We've talked about that a little bit on the podcast, but she had started to kind of feel that, you know, our prayer time had started to drift a little bit into just, hey, here's our list of things we're going to pray for. We're going to pray for a good night's sleep, and we're going to pray for good dreams, and we're going to do these things. And she just had this prompting of, you know what, I need to slow down. I need to show the kids that praying isn't just about asking God for stuff. It's about taking time to listen, and it's a conversation. And she had she told them the picture, or just like, hey, how would it make you feel if I just told you all of the things I needed from you, but then never listened to what you had to say? And that kind of stuck with them, like, oh, wow, we need to listen and hear what God has to say. And so she intentionally
Which you have a 12-year-old?
We have a 12-year-old and almost 7-year-old. Well, at the time, so she's turning 7 tomorrow while we're recording this. So tomorrow she'll be 7.
So in the future,
then it would be a nearly
So in the past, she turned.
In the past, she
This is
just
getting
turned
complicated.
7. Yeah, time travel.
I don't know if to say happy early birthday or happy belated birthday.
It's both at this point. Anyway,
and then an almost 5-year-old.
Yeah, and an almost 5-year-old, and so she has them all there, and I'm not there. I'm at the game shop playing with my friends and stuff, and she's taking them through the prayer thing, and she just had this prompting: we need to be still. And so she was teaching them that scripture, be still and know that I'm God, and help them to kind of calm down. And then Audrey is just very, her and Hannah are a lot alike in this way. She's a feeler. She can hear from God very easily in moments like that. And she just had this prompting of like, I need to show them that they can listen and see what God drops in their heart. And she had them all be quiet and be still and listen, and just the things that my girls were able to sense and see in that moment were just so cool. So Ellie, I don't know if I've told a story about Ellie yet or not, but she's so sensitive. She has such a big heart for people. Every night, whenever she gets to lead the prayer, she prays for the whole world to be saved. You know, she's just like, she just loves. She loves animals and she loves small things, and that's Ellie. Well, Audrey asked her, what did you feel? What did you see during that time where we were being quiet? And she said, I was with Jesus and he was holding my hand and we were up on a hill and he was showing me everything that he had made. And it was just like this really pretty special like moment that she got to have, just, being quiet and listening to Jesus. And then of course, the younger one starts to tell her story. And this is actually the next night when I am there, and it's awesome. So she's like, I was there with Jesus and he was holding my hand and we were up on a mountain and we played Smash Brothers. I was like, yeah, that's my girl. But anyway, I know, as silly as that is, we miss moments like that when we're in a hurry, and we miss opportunities. And that, to me, like seeing when my kids are overcharged and my kids are overstimulated, it's a sign that I'm probably modeling that. And I need to have a heart check, and I need to look at my life, and I need to see, okay, yeah, we're going to turn the TV off now. We're not going to just look for that next thing. And I need to get off my phone. I need to put this device away. I need to be aware and present in the moment. And I got to take my, this is semi-related, I guess, but me being present for my kids looked like taking my older two to go see Godzilla versus Kong. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And so we went, but like taking them and like going and seeing a big movie, like we hadn't done that in a long time. And anyway, it was cool to make that a priority. And they felt really like, oh, wow, yeah, Dad's going to take the time to do that. And
that's awesome.
So it was good.
So that reminds me of the old saying, all of this does. The old saying of like, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey.
Yep.
And as corny as that is, it definitely applies here. And to show a little bit of my nerdy side, thinking through the Lord of the Rings, how there's no story. Like if it's just like Frodo gets the ring and he destroys it, there's nothing in the middle. There's nothing.
If the Eagles take him
to
the Shire,
which is completely stupid. Shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Anyways,
it wouldn't have been a story.
That's what I'm saying.
The Eagles show up.
Well, even Tolkien writes the characters that like the eagle that would not make any sense.
Yes. Yeah. And so, and it's an all-seeing eye. It would see the eagles. Boom, shot down, movie over.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, everyone. But just thinking through like how much of the story of our lives do we miss because we're so concerned about the ending or so worried about the ending. So we're all dads and we all work and you just get busy, and we already did one on busyness and kind of slowing down and focusing in on your life, and I think this is kind of in that same vein, just a little bit of a different take on it, sort of, but same thing where like so there were a few days there a couple weeks ago where I was working late every night, and it wasn't an intentional thing, it was just the way the schedule worked out. And the last night, it was Friday night, and my oldest son, Zion, took a stand. It was like, I'm not going to bed until Dad gets home. I wasn't going to be home till like 9:30, and he goes to bed at 8. But Caitlin was like, she made a good call. She was like, okay, like you can stay up and you can see your dad. And so when I got home and he's giving me a hug and then he can go to bed, but it gave me that like, I need to chill out. I need to be around more. So anyhow.
I'm not going to bed till Dad gets home.
He took a stand.
It's awesome.
We also want to like discipline your children when they defy their mom like that. But like that's the skill of parenting, is you can't be unilateral about everything.
And she's like, I'm not putting you in bed till your dad gets home.
You know what? Okay.
my wife is way more in tune to those things than I am. But so even like taking even the analogy of Lord of the Rings, that I've tried to recognize in the process, but truthfully, I forget my own teachings about some of this stuff because in the moment it just feels so frustrating or heavy, and you're just not thinking about it. But even a story like that, it's the journey that shapes you into the kind of person that's ready for the destination. And I think that's kind of God's work. Is He won't give us something that he knows we're not ready for. Or if he does, that's almost a form of discipline.
Yeah.
A form of discipline God has for us is to give us what we think we want when we want it, or close to when we want it. But we need to be the kind of person that's ready for the destination that we're not currently.
Yeah.
That we wouldn't actually be the person ready for it if we got there too quick. And I think that's where people that get over promoted, you even see some people who have success too early in life. Failure is so good for people that are young, or having to, dealing with young adults in their 20s that like think they're awesome or think that they deserve something or aren't experiencing the kinds of growth or success that they think they should get. I love making them mad by saying like,
Gosh.
like you're not ready. Like you're exactly where you need to be, and where you want to be, you're not ready for.
Yeah.
It's good that you fail. It's good that you don't have success. It's good that you're not as promoted as you think you deserve to be, because if you did, you wouldn't be ready for it.
Yeah.
And just the number of people, that's one of the concerns I have for the way our economy has been shaped by people who become very wealthy, like tech companies becoming very wealthy at a very young age, or people who come into inheritances too early. There's a proverb that says wealth gained too hastily will dwindle in the end, but gathering little by little, gaining wealth little by little will be preserved. And many times we joke about it like you have more money than sense. You have more money than wisdom. And you're not ready for that. And we forget that like God is interested in the person we become, because what we have, where we have lived, what status we have, those things aren't eternal. What's eternal is our character. And so God is more interested in our character than meeting every desire we have, or even the way he fulfills his promises. He perfectly times them. His faithfulness is not measured by our perspective of it. When God is content to take hundreds of years, that Genesis 3:15 is a promise of a snake crusher, and yet we go through thousands of pages of our Bible before we get to the arrival of that. Or he makes a covenant with David that a son of David will build his house in 2 Samuel 7. And yet it's like approximately 1,000 years before Jesus arrives. Why? Like God could have done something immediately. Well, I don't know exactly why, but I do know that he's faithful. And that even if his faithfulness takes longer than my lifetime, can I trust him, and can I become the kind of person who has the fruit of patience, who has the fruit of trust, who bears the fruit of joy that isn't conditioned on my circumstance?
Yeah, God's faithfulness is never in question. Ours is.
Ours is constantly.
Yes.
Yeah. Don't be hasty, little hobbit.
They're going to be like, these guys, why are they talking about Lord of the Rings so much?
Full Lord of the Rings.
What you guys don't know is that we talk about Lord of the Rings almost every episode at the end. After the cameras shut off.
It might be the only real nerdy thing that we all share. We all have different things we're nerdy about,
Yes.
but that one's one that we share.
It's universal and timeless, and only one of the most well-written fantasy series of all time. So
There's, I'm not, this isn't my profession, but like, I'm not sure there is a creator who has created a world as brilliant as Tolkien has created. That lore is just, it's incredible.
Deep.
So back to topic. So what are the things that we can be doing? That we, not just that what we need to learn, but what are practices, habits, disciplines that we can engage in that help us in the meantime.
I think, some of the stuff that we have talked about through this season has been personally helpful for me. We mentioned in the intentional living episode, you brought out a few different journals and things that you've recommended. I've been attempting to put the monk manual thing into practice, and maybe this will be encouraging for anybody else who was inspired by that episode. I did really well for about a month, and it was going really well.
And it's a 90-day journal.
It's a
so you're a
90-day
third of the way
journal.
through.
Third of the way through. And then I did not do so well for the last couple of weeks. And so I'm in the in-between of even implementing that discipline. And, these habits, you listen to these podcasts that are spread out over time. It may even sound like, oh, yeah, we got all these things working. And
Oh, gosh, no.
but certainly not. Certainly not. And so that's one thing for me that I've found in the time that I was using it and I was doing it well was just those little moments of reflection and awareness each day and recognizing, oh, there's something God is teaching me through this time. There's a discontent in me. There's something in me that's being worked on and being developed. And I think sometimes the awareness that there is progress happening can even help make that discomfort of waiting not feel so frustrating. And maybe that's my own emotional immaturity, but it can be frustrating to just feel like you're putting a lot of effort in and not making any progress. But having that daily habit of looking and planning and seeing, oh, this is actually making an impact. And I'm more aware now. And I've had great conversations with my wife about where my time is being spent. And I'm deciding, oh, I actually don't have all the time that I thought I had to do everything I was wanting to do. So I need to put this away.
Yeah.
And so I think practices like that are a practical way that we can manage that discontent. I think, this is maybe a little obvious, but taking those things to God obviously is important, and praying through those things, and not just from a, hey, God, help me feel better way, but what are you teaching me? What are you showing me? What is being worked in me? What are you trying to develop in me? And looking for opportunities to work on those things. It's easy to say that, and it's easy to say that's a practical thing you can do. It's a lot harder to do that.
Yeah.
And so I think that would be my response in the season that I'm in right now. Like there is a lot of uncertainty about where things are going, and there's a lot of things in my heart that I'm not sure what they mean yet, and I'm sort of unpacking that. And I've been having conversations with my wife, and like, why am I feeling this way? Is it because I'm distracted and because I'm not paying attention to the right things, or is God actually telling me something? Is it like, how do we discern between impatience and then a prompting of the Holy Spirit that's actually helping prod us towards where we need to go? I know my default is kind of like Hannah, is to be more like, okay, yeah, we got things going, we're good. I don't actively,
I just got comfortable.
Yeah.
We just got a good rhythm.
Yeah.
You say you're unhappy with the rhythm. Why? Because
Right.
I'm happy.
I'm high in adaptability. That doesn't mean I go and seek change all the time. But anyway, that's my thoughts.
Yeah. I think for me, I know we talked bad about this during intentional living, but like, I'm a pretty busy person in terms of there's always a project, or there's always like an interest. It may not be always work related, but like I want to work on all my guitars. It's going to take me a while. It's going to take me like 2 weeks. And so I get them all set up. I get them all the way I like them. I'm no Luther, so it takes me a minute. But then like that project's over, and then I'm like, I'm going to build a PC.
Yep.
So then I build a PC. It's done. And then I'm like, I need another one. I need something else to do.
Another project.
Yeah. And so I am very, very project, like always something. I have to do something, or I feel like I'm doing nothing. But sometimes it's exactly what I need to do. But I didn't recognize that in myself at all. I just thought I'm doing fun things. I'm doing things I enjoy. But having Caitlin, having my wife step in and say, you are always picking something up and like starting some random thing.
Yeah.
Like it's great that you have those interests, but like you got to slow down, or you got to chill out. You got to take time. So I'm going to encourage you even a little more than Josh, just to one up him, that I also bought a monk manual and haven't started it yet. So I have a few minor like OCD tendencies, and I don't want to start it
Until it's perfect.
Until it's perfect. Like, I'm ready for this.
Because it's not dated. It's any 3 month period. It's
Yes.
a 90 day period. You can start it that's not conditional on a particular date.
Right. So I am like, I know it sounds dumb and I'm sorry, but like I want it to be the first.
Right.
But then when the first happens, I'm like, I'm not ready for this yet. Like,
Then you gotta wait a whole other month.
I'm with you.
I have a green little notebook that I carry around and I practice what the monk manual has in it. And I'm decent at doing it. I'm not perfect. The reflection part has been huge for me. And that was what I was going to say, was just reflecting on where I'm at, why I'm here, what I can learn while I'm here. How was my mood today? Like really reflecting on the moment has been very, very beneficial. But I haven't started the monk manual at all.
I think the daily reflections and even the weekly ones, I know you said you had a tough time with the weekly ones. Those
still have a tough time.
The picking the right day to do that has been the tough thing for me, because like you kind of want to do it at the end or at the start. And both of those days for me, I'm like, I just don't want to, mentally be there. But that habit of actually taking the time to think through, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling that way? And then I look at my behavior for the past week, and I look at the choices I've made, and I can see my emotional state and my spiritual state, like where I'm at, is a result of the decisions I made earlier in the week. And those could either have been healthy decisions or unhealthy decisions. And that awareness, we keep saying awareness over and over. It's like a buzzword for this podcast, but that really, I think, is key in actually making progress and growing. You have to kind of know where you are before you can actually get to where you want to be. I think a lot of times we want to get to wherever that next thing is just because we're actually really dissatisfied with who we are and where we are. And rather than focus on the process of becoming the kind of person that is where we want to be, we just want the thing without all the work to get from here to there. So that reflection is a big part for me.
Been very helpful.
The monk manual and then another journal that I mentioned in that episode helped me with the daily reflection. And I can see right now that the big gap is the weekly reflection. And I still have not been able to do it because I feel like Friday is too early to get a full reflection. Saturday has gotten, that's one of my frustration points. It's like our current rhythms, Saturdays are terrible, and I'm not getting that time to reflect. I'm like, well, I'll do it Sunday afternoon. And then like 6 weeks in a row, 8 weeks in a row, we're doing this on that day, and we have that on that day. And so the weekly reflection has been the biggest challenge that I feel like is a not a centerpiece, but it's a major piece of getting that more reflective habit of being able to really be, because that is my struggle. Reflection was a key piece in me being able to be more present to the moment. Without awareness, our life tends to be driven by distraction amid habit and reactivity. So being aware of all those and kind of hacking those, it took reflection. But then the weekly reflection is a piece that I can see as a piece that I need to build. But two other additional things besides the things you're talking about that have been important for me was gratitude journaling. That my wife, our 10th anniversary, bought me a gratitude journal, and it was a 1 year. And so I'm super weird about these things. This is where like the achiever in me, like, okay, it's a 1 year. I'm going to do it daily for a year. Right. And after the first year I finished, was like, I don't feel like I did that right. And so I challenged myself to a second year. And after a second year, I'm like, okay, I think I'm just starting to get this practice. And so I'm finishing a third year. Daily practicing gratitude, consciously taking the time to pay attention to the things that you can be grateful for. Because it is not hard for me to pay attention to the things that frustrate me, that disappoint me, that discourage me. That's easy for me. I'm cynical about things that I don't like that about my flesh and personality. Very skeptical and have a very high bar of excellence and approval. So I don't meet that bar. So nobody else is going to meet that bar. Nothing in my life meets that standard. So practicing gratitude was a very important thing. Consciously paying attention to a facet of God's character that I'm grateful for, or an event that He has done, or the thing, the people in my life, or an event that happened, like consciously taking the time to slow that moment down, and then having a day, 2, 3 in a row that I just wrote something, and then I'm there again. And oh, wait a second, I've just been doing this out of habit, so need to pay more attention. Gratitude, and then learning to practice silence and stillness, learning to sit still and be quiet for a long period of time, to hijack that hurry that I gotta be fiddling with something, or my propensity towards distraction, mind-numbing activities that just kill time. When I only have these little moments, I just need to kill the time. So I'll pull out a game on my phone, or just turn on something because I don't like the silence. And so learning to sit still for long periods of time and just be quiet and still before the Lord practices the ability to hear the still small voice of the Lord. And then Sabbath has been a very important rhythm for me that has made me recognize the way time passes. It's how little control we have over time, and how small our time really is, and how time is a gift. We think of time just as this, like, that thing we kill, we use, we buy, but instead it's a gift that we receive, and that, like, God's super chill with allowing us, like, not a lot of time in our lives. And so he gives it as a gift, and Sabbath has been that, focusing on being rather than doing or accomplishing or grasping. It has pulled my propensity to try to grasp in life. It's toned that back and developed me a little bit more. I still got a long way to go, but developed me a little bit more on receiving time as a gift. And when we're in between, like, time becomes our enemy. And the big moment for that was 3 years ago. I was given a sabbatical. We have sabbatical policies in our staff, and I was given a sabbatical, and I had finished one season, and I was just starting a new season where I wasn't campus pastor anymore. I was just at an executive level, and I wasn't burned out. I don't think burned out would be the right word, but I was exhausted, and it was weird because it was 30 days. Day 15 is when I stopped thinking about work. 15 days.
Dang.
Where I'm trying not to think about work. I'm fighting that impulse. And it wasn't until day 16 where I started seeing time as a gift.
Right.
And then it was like a 6-day stretch was just awesome. And then came the, like, okay, I got to get ready for work. I got to get ahead of this project. I got to, and having to fight that for the last. So I'm looking forward to my next sabbatical. I don't know when it'll be, but to with that kind of exercise now. And so when people take their first sabbatical, I tell them, I don't know if it's going to be just a couple days. It could be the entire time. You could be fighting these impulses that we have towards attacking time, seizing our time, when we need to get used to learning how to receive it as a gift. And Sabbath should do that in a 1-in-7 rhythm, where we receive it as a gift, and then 6 days we're coming from that gift of time to now we're not grasping at it, seizing it, but we're properly working in the rhythm God designed all of creation to be in. So those are my disciplines.
Okay.
I think another thing that that I would encourage people to do when they're in that season is find somebody to talk to. I think having conversations around those sorts of feelings and those frustrations, when I look back at times like that, and I did have the benefit of actually carving out time to have a conversation with my wife, and I just feel better after that. I'm like, oh yeah, you've been feeling it too. Okay, good. Like I'm not losing it or anything. Or a close friend or another family member or a mentor. I think those kinds of conversations in those seasons can be very helpful. It can, to me, it even as somebody who's not actively seeking those kinds of conversations all the time. It's helpful because it at least gives me a way to process what I'm feeling, to get it out, and then look at it and say, oh, okay, yeah. And I get the feedback of like, well, why do you think you're feeling that way? I'm like, I don't know. I do feel this way. And then like, well, have you thought about this? No, I hadn't thought about that. And that process, I think as cheesy as it sounds, it's therapeutic, it's like, okay, I'm getting the internal struggle and the frustration out, and I'm allowing, I'm letting myself be vulnerable to somebody else, to let them speak into my life, to encourage me, to challenge me. And usually on the other side of those conversations, there's a lightness and there's a, oh, wow, yeah, I feel better now. And I'm not feeling the weight of it as much as I was before. And yeah, I haven't got to where I wanted to go. There's still this waiting that has to happen, but there's somebody else helping carry the burden. And I think that has been a healthy and helpful rhythm in my life. And I think it's something I need to actively seek more often. So I'd encourage people
on a
to do that.
podcast conversation?
Yeah. Honestly, like sometimes we get in here and we do these batch recordings. I'm like, man, I'm tired at the end, but I felt good.
Yeah.
It felt good to get some of that stuff
Yeah.
out. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So start a podcast, get some buddies, have a little group therapy session. You'll be just fine. Anyway,
You can get subscribers.
Yeah. That's awesome.
What do you think?
All right. Well, I think I don't know that I have a recommendation specifically in this area. It does remind me, when talking about slowing down in particular, it was a book I read a long time ago, actually, by a guy named Shane Claiborne. It was really popular at the time. I cannot remember the name of it.
Like the Welcome to the Revolution?
Something like that. It's similar. It's got the word revolution in it.
Revolution.
But just him being your average dude, and then his life takes him all the way to hanging out with Mother Teresa and serving with her, and like his habit of slowing down and recognizing these things in his life. I mean, I was probably in high school when I read that, but it's always stuck. Irresistible Revolution.
There it is.
That's what it's called. It's a very good book. So
cool. I haven't heard about that one before.
Yeah,
I'll
it's great.
Check that out.
That's old. Like, gosh.
I don't know where it came from. It just hit me, and I was like, man, this makes me think of that guy, what he went through. So
Yeah, I don't know if there's a book specifically written, and there probably is, but on how to get through the in-between times.
yeah.
But learning time and patience, I recommend The Sabbath by Abraham Joshua Heschel, a Jewish rabbi. His books are just incredible. But The Sabbath is a real short book. And I'm currently reading Abundant Simplicity by Jan Johnson. And she does a really great job working through that. And then I guess another one on this kinds of stuff would be Sacred Rhythms by Ruth Haley Barton. I don't know, might have recommended that on
I think you may have mentioned it once.
one
or
on
twice
like spiritual
before.
disciplines or something. But her chapter on Sabbath was really good because she was a mom of 3 learning to practice Sabbath. So that was really helpful to see someone busy. Not that Sabbath is the key on all this, but sitting still, being patient, that just comes with spiritual. You have to see it as a spiritual discipline. That then has a downstream effect on working on your patience.
I would say The Practice of the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence.
Yeah.
I actually found a sort of modern English translation or update of that that I really enjoyed. I'd actually tried to read it a few times before getting that one, and it is written in sort of an old style, so that sometimes the language can be a little tough to.
Because Brother Lawrence was French, right?
Yeah,
and it was translated a couple hundred years ago.
Yeah, there were letters that they had discovered that he had written to a few different people, and some collections of his writings and stuff. But the whole theme of that book is around being present to the moment and being aware of God's presence in the mundane. He was a Franciscan monk who spent a lot of time in the kitchens, cleaning and cooking and cleaning, and just he had cultivated this sense and this awareness of God's presence just in every sort of present, every sort of in the moment moments of life, like right now, like the now moments of life, and the mundane, and the washing dishes, and the sweeping up and cleaning and cooking. And it's just it's a good book to help highlight how we can cultivate that, because it is something you cultivate. It's not something you just flip a switch and turn on.
Yeah.
It's like you have to practice it. So that one was really good there. If you can find a more modern English translation, that might make it a little easier to read, because some of the language is kind of weird. Not weird, old. But that one was
it's
really
clunky for
Yeah.
the way we Americanized 21st century English.
good. Yeah. I remember there's one line that sticks out that is sort of in the old style. It's written from like somebody who was writing about a conversation he had with Brother Lawrence. And so the turns of phrase are just kind of odd, where it's like that he would be made to smart for his foolishness. It's like, smart? Oh, you mean like pain? Like, ooh, that's smart. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I wasn't
I
connected
would
to that.
not have picked that up, dude.
Yeah, and so there's a little bit of that. So if you can find a modern English one, I would say that would be good.
Very
That's good.
good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, stay grateful, thankful, faithful. Any more fools?
Full of food.
There we go.
Peace,
Keep your tummy
full.
silent full.
Yes, all of those things, and stay encouraged, I think, through those seasons. But hey, again, thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us today on the podcast, whether you were watching on YouTube or you're joining us through whatever app you get your podcast through. We appreciate you listening and tuning in and joining in on the conversation. Like we said, remember, we've got that Q&R coming up.
Yep.
So
The
submit those things.
Final episode of this season, so you want to get those questions in quickly.
Yes,
Look
absolutely.
At the link. There's a link there, right, Tyler?
Yep, it's coming up somewhere around here.
Yeah.
Man, I hope I remember to do that. All right. Well, hey, you guys have a great one, and we'll catch you later.